Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool update for you from the brand Nodus. A little bit about them. They were founded back in 2016 out of Long Beach, which is located in LA County in California, which is also where I'm located, which is pretty nice. Now, a little bit about the brand. They're basically a modern micro brand startup, and they really focus on offering that really high quality, high value wristwatch with also high design, which I think they've kind of hit the pinnacle of that here in this particular watch. A little bit about this type of watch is I would consider it an everyday watch. And when you're looking for an everyday watch, you're going to want something that's really a versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes. Now, a little bit about this particular model. This is the Contrail 39 in infinity blue dial. So this is a brand new release for them. Along with the new dial also comes a new rotating bezel option in the stainless steel, which I reviewed their press loaner previously. And then as far as any other updates, they did update the clasp, which I'm looking forward to showing you guys here in the review. Now, some things are still the same. These are still assembled and regulated in the US and still do have a 2-year, 24-month warranty, which I think is absolutely outstanding. As far as pricing goes, the 12-hour bezel goes for around $600, while the 39 goes around for $550. And I think at those price points, these offer extreme amounts of value, especially when you consider what they're going to be comparable to when it comes to what else is out there in the market. So with that said, let's go ahead and get a closer look. Okay, now this is of course the 39mm model without the bidirectional bezel. Here you're going to see the bidirectional bezel. So just to give you an idea of the scale, really not too far off. Of course, they're going to share the same dial layout and whatnot in crystal. It's really just going to be that bezel, and that bezel does add just about 1.5 millimeters of width on there, and it's a really lovely bezel as far as the action goes and everything like that. But for me, I aesthetically prefer the smooth 39 with this great sunbrush bezel option. Although this one honestly was really winning me over, but the fact that this is available also with a blue dial is kind of what made me go there. Now, of course, the specs did go across the screen earlier, but this is a 39mm diameter with a 13mm height. But if you don't count the crystal, essentially the case is about 11.8mm thick, and then it has a 47mm lug to lug. It is definitely a nice mixture of brushed and polished here. Great bevels, you can see great transitions, super clean. Drilled lugs, absolutely fantastic. Everything's solid as far as the bracelet goes. Case back, screw down crown, 200 meters water resistance. This thing is just basically built to pretty much go with you anywhere. And when you think of a go with you anywhere watch, especially with a blue dial option, you might be thinking the blue dial Alpinist special edition. But of course, these are very limited. And although these are made in, of course, a smaller production range, these are still going to be a lot more readily available and honestly offer way more bang per buck. Come on bracelet, higher beat movement, and honestly, I think an even nicer dial there. As you can see, just a higher contrasting, where the Seiko is going to be more of a kind of a dark blue. It stays very much in the dark blue tones. Here you can get really dark blues with very bright blues also integrated in. Now, when it comes to kind of the design aesthetic of this particular piece, it definitely draws inspiration from the Sinn 556. Now, this is the 556 IB, which is, of course, I for the indices there instead of the numerals, and then the B for blue. And honestly, man, I've loved this watch for a long time, owned it for a long time, and this Nodus really just gives it a flat out run for its money. At just $550 versus, well, I mean, these are, I don't know what the going rates are these days, but $1,400-$1,500. You know, you're basically triple the cost here for the Sinn. Of course, the Sinn is going to have some things that are objectively better, and of course there's always going to be subjectively better things, but objectively you are going to get a better movement in the that top grade ETA 2824 top grade and everything. and you are going to get a display case back versus the the etched case back here. But essentially everything else, you drilled lugs, yeah, similar aesthetic, similar, I guess, use case as far as being something that's overbuilt, 200 meters water resistant, screw down crown, everyday watch. And you can see there's definitely a different approach aesthetically here, with the way that the dial space is filled. And then of course this is I believe a 38.5 versus here's the 39, but they definitely have little trade-offs in the way that they wear as far as sizing goes. Definitely gonna have the thicker lugs, thicker bezel. Here you're gonna have more is gonna be open dial layout, but because of the more slender curves here on these lugs and the way that they taper and whatnot, it definitely appears smaller on the wrist, although it is only just about 0.5 millimeter smaller. So it's visually going to be smaller. And here you do have a little bit of a smaller dial, which helps shrink things down if maybe you're somebody who really enjoys a smaller watch. So there's some visual tricks here that are definitely there. But then as far as the finishing goes, I mean, the Nodus definitely takes it to another level, where the Sinn is really just more minimal and just within that kind of German kind of design aesthetic. It's really much more about being a tool watch there, even with this great blue dial. And then again, it's a more of a lower contrast blue dial, as you can see there. It's going to be darker blue and then some brighter blue there. Doesn't really get too deep into the blacks or the midnight blues, but it's more of a flat dial versus this Nodus, which is going to be much more high contrast on on that sun brush finish, which I think is absolutely gorgeous. These are two great pieces, but honestly, since this is touched down, I really haven't had much of any type of want to put this on my wrist, which is saying a lot considering these price points. Obviously, Sinn has a ton of heritage there. And it's obviously not hot horology or anything, but as far as street cred goes, it's definitely up there with those kind of mid-tier entry-level watches, like Oris. I'd say Sinn and Oris are kind of the aspirational buyers, safe bets. You can buy a Sinn, you can buy an Oris and get a good amount of street cred. When it comes to micro brands, I think what Nodus has done is they've really slotted themselves in nicely. With their pricing structure, they're not trying to be a luxury brand. They're very open about that. They have the everyman, in mind when it comes to their timepieces. And man, this thing just really delivers. I just love this piece, and I see so much success in the future. As long as they can keep maintaining these great releases. So, of course, not a lot has changed as far as the construction goes. Still, 3016 stainless steel and everything like that, brushed and polished. You're going to have the polished sides. But one thing that they did, of course, update is the clasp. And you can see here that it secures, much tighter, as you can see there. You can try to force play into it, and that'll happen with any clasp, but it's much different than, let's say, the original clasp release, which I believe is still on this prototype, where the clasp is just a little bit looser. As you can see there, it does have a little bit of play where this pops up just a hair, and can be a little annoying at times because the tolerance just wasn't quite as tight, I think, as one would like. But of course, everything else, you got the beveled finishes, everything solid, screw-in links and whatnot. Definitely still tons of bang per buck, but it could have been a tighter tolerance, and here you do have that tighter tolerance. So this is going to lay super flat and just really nicely on wrist. And then of course you still do have a myriad of options as far as how much micro adjustment you're going to get there. And I definitely do love a clasp with a lot of micro adjust holes, especially in something like this where there's not really a half link option. So it's really great to see, and does definitely help with fitment. So of course, Again, beautifully done bracelet. It does taper down to about 18 millimeters, as you can see. Not a huge taper because it's only going from 20 to 18, but still really nicely done. And of course, fully milled clasp. Beautiful finishing there, as you can see. That very high polished bevel edge there, really beautifully chamfered. Fantastic. And it obviously ties into the case finishing, which is also just top notch there, and beautifully done. The finishing on here is absolutely outstanding, and I think it's one of the things that set it apart from pretty much other watches in this price range. And that, of course, the Nodus brand was started by a couple of watch enthusiasts. They're not a couple of venture capitalists that are, you know, looking at a space in a market. They were just a couple of watch enthusiasts that were looking to build watches that they would enjoy to wear. So big props to the Nodus team from that perspective. So with that said, let's go ahead and get this piece on wrist. Okay, now as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this 39 millimeter works just about perfectly. Even when you get it up close there, it doesn't look too oversized or anything like that, which of course, due to kind of the lens distortion and whatnot, it can often appear very large when you're looking at kind of a wristy oriented shot. But once you get my arm there into play and get a little bit more of an idea of the scale of the watch, this thing just wears absolutely perfectly. And you know, since it's come in, I've pretty much worn this thing nonstop, and I'm just absolutely loving it. Look at the way that the light plays off of that bezel there, that fixed bezel, and then it does have that high polished bevel there at the base, which helps tie into the bevels, of course, along the case. And then very uniform brushing there all across the bracelet. Very, very comfortable. Of course, you are going to have all those micro adjusts, and as you can see, it does drape around the wrist quite nicely. It's a little bit tall because of that crystal there, but by no means is it, you know, it's not in the same category as, you know, a big bulbous diver or anything like that. I think sometimes when you're holding the watch off wrist and you're kind of looking at the proportions and the way that it feels, it can appear thicker than it actually is. But once you have it on wrist, you can see that it does wear really, really just quite nicely. So big fan of that. So let's go ahead and move on to some low light transition shots. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, that C3 lume is just pumping away, and that's a place where, as far as, you know, in competition to the Sinn or the Alpinist, it definitely is going to be leagues ahead because of that lume there. And the really nice thing is you can even see that the seconds hand, although it is painted white, is also dipped on the tip there. So you do get some lume there, so you can actually catch the running seconds. So you know your watch is still running, which is really nice. Of course, it's a bit faint here. I didn't really pre-charge this one because, of course, it's not a diver, so I know it's not really, you know, lume isn't going to be a huge part of the buying package here, but definitely beautifully executed, and I just love those tones. As you can see here from the low light transition, you know, what I like to do with these low light transitions is kind of give you an idea of more what this watch is going to look like day to day, and kind of as you're coming in and out of a vehicle, in and out of buildings, you know, some dimmer lighting situations than what my hot studio lights can reproduce, which definitely are going to be more towards the spectrum of, you know, really bright, full-on daylight. So here, as you can see, one of the nice things, it gives you an idea of the contrast again of this dial. Look how dark and black basically the dark portions are of the dial, but how beautifully and vibrant and electric that infinity blue is here. As you can see, it almost looks like a special effect. Absolutely beautiful, and the brushing is very, very finely done, to where it really almost has like this metallic-y sheen. Oh, there you go. That's a good spot to kind of catch there. Look at how beautifully done that bezel is. And then, I'm sorry, the dial, but the bezel, of course, as well, catches light quite nicely. If I can bring the lighting down here, you can get a nice idea of the finishing and how uniform this brushing is. As you can see, really beautifully done. The way the light transitions over the brushing, it gives you a nice idea of just how uniform and finely done that is. And you can see there, really, really just top-notch work from the Nodus team. So really beautifully done. So let's go ahead and get into some of my closing thoughts. Now, of course, this thing offers tons of bang per buck. You know, it's not a cheap watch by any means, but it's far from expensive at $550. It does come in lower than, you know, even when you were getting a good price on that Blue Alpinist. If you bought them right there at opening bid, they were $600. So this is outstanding. And then, you know, of course, if you want to get the 12-hour bezel option, it does give you a little bit more functionality there. And that's still at $600, and it does still have the bracelet, the clasp, everything you love here in this package. But for me, it's aesthetically a bit more pleasing in this 39mm configuration. Now on the wrist, of course, it has really, really nice proportions, super comfortable, and a very balanced wear because it does have that milled clasp, you know, which does help balance that out on the wrist because you do have, you know, a I wouldn't say bigger case, but just a more purposeful tool case, right? It's not super thin or svelte, so I wouldn't expect the clasp to be very thin or svelte. So it was a nice offset there, which I think keeps it very balanced. Now, of course, the 39, it really reminds me of a kind of mixture of the Sinn 556 IB that I showed earlier, and with a couple of touches of Monta Triumph, another watch that I love. Of course, both of those watches are much more expensive. As far as the Monta Triumph goes, it does have that kind of the chapter ring, adding another dimension there, and then of course that sunbrush bezel, which I think is really, really well executed here in this case as well. That's really great company to be in. And then of course at the price point you're getting a lot. Of course the levels of fit aren't going to be quite there because there's two halves to fit and finish, right? The fitment is going to be the tight tolerances and everything like that, and then the finish is going to be, you know, how finely everything is finished from, you know, the brushing and polishing and the transitions and the sharpness aspect there. So you're not going to be getting, you know, that luxury level of fitment, but the finishing is going to be really close. You know, it's just a hair off, which is very impressive, especially at this price point. So it definitely makes you feel more like an everyday kind of everyman piece. Now, thinking about the 12-hour bezel really briefly, that definitely, of course, reminds you of a Sinn 104. That's kind of the common design language and inspiration where they kind of drew from, you know, but it has a more useful bezel layout, you know, and then, of course, a much more reasonable cost, which is really great, especially in the Blue Dial variant, which is something that is available from Sinn as well, but they don't have the stainless option as far as the bezel goes, and they don't have a 12-hour bezel option, which I think is just killer from that perspective. And again, it kind of harkens back to the owners kind of trying to make watches that they would use, right? These guys travel, they go overseas to their factories and whatnot, they check in with the manufacturers, and you know, they're doing traveling, they're using these complications. So I think that's just really great that it does have that kind of form and function factor, a great balance there. Now, as far as model variants go, there's the black sand, the mute gray, ballistic green, Laguna sand, which is a beautiful cream dial, very popular. And now also a new release is the Arctic white dial option, which has been released with this beautiful infinity blue, which I think both options are just killer. But for me, as you guys know, for the channel, I love a good blue dial. As far as comparable models go, we kind of touched on them out there. I don't think there's really anything that's comparable across the board, one for one, you know, something in this price range that offers this type of bang per buck. I think everything that this is competitive with is is going to be a lot more expensive, to include the Blue Alpinist, which now on the used market is, you know, marked up to $300, $400, $500. So even from that perspective, Seiko couldn't even offer you as much bang per buck as this watch is offering you, which is really quite a telling thing. So really the bottom line here is it's just another super impressive release and a great update to a wonderful line, which I'm hoping will continue to grow and evolve. And I just love that Nodus as a brand, you know, of course they're watch enthusiasts themselves, and they really keep that everyman in mind, and they're not trying to build necessarily somebody's next grail watch or the next kind of pseudo luxury timepiece. They're creating really great functional usable timepieces, and I think their branding wise they've done a really great job with pushing this as just a really cool, fun, enthusiast based brand, and not necessarily trying to be anything more than that. So I think they're really nailing it right now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.